Greg and Richard right here on Talking Reds.
Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. It's FA Cup Round 5 weekend, and I'm your Talking Reds host, Greg Oram, along with my fellow Forest fanatic from across the Atlantic, the very weird Richard Spray.
You know, it's not a bad idea.
What?
Making a girl. Actually making a girl.
What would you little maniacs like to do first? Chips, dips, chains, whips.
Anything. You told me you were combing your hair!
Drink it. In the family juice. In the family juice.
On the telephone?
Hey, he don't even have his license, Lisa. Well, my nuts are halfway up my ass, but other than that, I'm perfect.
You know about the reality. Don't ruin the fantasy, okay?
Oh, it's another epic intro for Richard. How are you, sir?
Oh, man, it's hard. That might be one of the best ones I've heard thus far. That was really good. Not so family-friendly in moments, but that's okay. Yeah, that was fantastic, man. Well done. And what a classic that movie is. What a classic.
John Hughes, legend. And the regulars know that there's the intros, and if you're new here, then it always starts in the same kind of way. But we are here to talk about Forest, so we turn our attention back to the FA Cup as we look ahead to Monday night's fifth round tie at the City Ground when Forest will host Premier League Ipswich Town. Now, we all know that the trip to Exeter in round 4 was anything but straightforward, as Forest made a team's worth of changes. So, where is Nuno at now in terms of Cup versus League priorities? And what sort of personnel will he deem suitable against a team in the bottom 3 who themselves may prefer to rest important players in their fight for survival? Here with Richard and I to preview this one, we have our Talking Texan Rangers, Ross Taylor and Bruce Johnston.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe?
Yup, another Texas classic.
How we doing, boys? Good to have the Texans with us. Ross, how you doing, mate?
I'm very well, and it's nice to be with a real Texan in Bruce. So, because I'm just a temporary Texan. But yeah, great to see you all.
No, not at all. And Brucey, our bearded beauty over there. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. It's beautiful weather here in Texas today. Got a lot of soccer on, and I'm ready for the Reds on Monday.
Excellent. If you are with us in the comments, and one or two of you are already, then please do let us know you're here. It's great if you can say hello, and we'll say hello back and all that kind of stuff. And if you're tuning into this episode later on the playback via YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, we thank you for joining us as well.
Please do go ahead and hit like and subscribe to be sure not to miss any future episodes from Talking Reds.
If you haven't already, please do hit like. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. A quick hello to Steph over in the US as well. Happy Saturday. Hey, Steph. And Dr. Anna Hewson, hello. Wolfie says, what the hell? Does Chris know you're speaking with Ross? Well, yeah, you know, Ross has been on before, Wolfie, don't worry. And whatever they offer you, he's going to double it. Well, twice nothing is pretty much nothing, so that's fine. And another £2 donation from our brilliant friend, Mark, Wayway NFFC. Thank you very much. He says, good news. No Omari Hutchison on Monday. I think, Bruce, you were saying beforehand that that's the case as well. So let's get into the match and everything that's coming up. Team and formation, I guess, is, Richard, the place to start. What do you reckon? I mean, the question we're asking is, how much is Nuno going to put on this game? Is he going to go quite strong? I mean, Villa went very strong last night against Cardiff. They got the 2-0 result. What do you think Nuno's going to do? What would you do?
I think given where we are in the table, I would imagine he's probably going to have a little bit of a mix of a blend of, some players that we probably typically see as starters, right? But then he's going to have a few guys fill in. I think this is a good opportunity, as we've talked about with Ina, for example, for a chance to rest him a little bit, because we are definitely going to need him for the remainder of the season to be at his peak. And so this could be a situation where you bring Moreno on the left, you bring Williams in on the right in that back line. Maybe you bring Morato in to rest Murillo. Maybe you throw in a Milenkovic just so you have the option to have someone who's, going to maintain organization in that defensive unit, as well as, provide meaningful minutes in terms of how he plays week in and week out. Typically, you could always say Bali comes in. That's not a bad problem to have a guy like that in waiting in the wings to play for you. So I could see maybe you sit, at least your two center backs that are such an important part of what we do to remain stout defensively. So yeah, I'm going to be curious what the midfield looks like. I can imagine Anderson's probably going to stay in, because it's always good to give a young player like that an opportunity to continue to progress and get minutes and maybe even fill somewhat of a leadership role in that middle of the park, unless you have a Yates come in, from the very beginning. But I could also see the value of potentially adding a Sangare in there as well, because he needs the opportunity to get some minutes and show something, because we've got a decision to make about what our sixth position looks like. So yeah, that's just initial thoughts, and I'm sure there's been plenty of talk about that on other pods and so forth, and I've seen different versions of this, but I kind of tend to favor a blend, but not, sit Morgan, sit Ina, sit some key pieces, so that we don't lose the opportunity to maintain that what we've been doing thus far with those kinds of players like Chris Wood as well.
What about you, Ross? What are you thinking in terms of, how many changes and so on?
Yeah, initially when Richard started that response, I was thinking, I really hope it's only 2 or 3 changes, because, we're getting towards the money end of this competition, and there's a real opportunity here. But then when you start listing the actual players, you do get to there's probably about 4 or 5 who could do with some minutes. It's worth us giving Tyro a run. Ina could do with the rotation. We need to probably utilize Sangare. Okay, well, that's 3. And then, once you get to the Bolly conversation, it could well become 4 or 5. So I just hope we don't lose the potency in terms of just making sure that we maybe start a little crisper at the top end of the field, with Morgan and Langer. The defensive rotation I'm more open to, and even the midfield rotation. But, when it comes to winning this game, I think, it's been said before, but the earlier we can get it done, I think the better for all. So I hope we go in hungry and and aggressive with our kind of high end of the field setup.
And Bruce, I'll ask you the same question. I mean, I'm kind of leaning in a certain direction when it comes to the changes. What are you thinking?
I actually agree with Richard and Ross here. When I was looking through the lineup, I was thinking maybe 3-4 changes. Someone like Aina, as previously mentioned, give him some rest. Callum Hudson-Odoi is the big question mark to me. I think Awani is going to get a start here. Maybe one midfielder change. I'd like to see Anderson. I'd like to see Morgan Gibbs-White get our best foot forward in the midfield, so we can put this one to bed fairly early, hopefully. And as previously mentioned, I mean, the Sangare, Danilo, Yates, Dominguez, who that third midfielder is the big question to me. And defensively, I'd prefer to see Eminem, Marino, and Williams, and of course Sales is basically our only choice at this point. But that's what I would expect to see. But I think the lineup's going to really dictate how, or show us how, Nuno is really viewing the cup.
Sure. Quick quiz question for you guys. I'll put it on the screen, so play along in the comments, and I'll ask the panel at the end. What was the score when Forest last played Ipswich in the FA Cup? We are going back a few years. There was a game at the City Ground, I'll tell you that much. So have a think back, if you maybe remember it or not. The last time we played Ipswich in the FA Cup, what was the score? So my thoughts are that Nuno is still going to make more changes than what you guys might be thinking. I still think he wants to get minutes into other squad members, and the fact that we are still in the top four and sitting third with a lot of games still to play, as much as he would want to go far in the cup, I still think that Nuno and the hierarchy at Forest would be prioritising the league. It's not necessarily what I would do, but I think that's what they might do. So I don't know that we'll see a whole raft of changes, but I think we will still see key areas possibly being looked at. I think a 1 year will play. That to me is a bit of a given. And as you touched on then, Bruce, Sells looks like the only option to play in goal. Hennessy's back as cover, but I think he's going to just stay as cover. I agree that Aina dropping out for this one makes a lot of sense with Nico switching to right back. So for Moreno to come in, would he bring Eric Da Silva and Moreira in at right back? I don't know. I know he played him against Exeter, and he also played in the game against Luton as well. So it just depends on whether or not he thinks that Premier League opposition is maybe a touch too far for him. I don't know. And I also think the Bolly plays. It looks like this year he's the FA Cup centre back. My thoughts are Sangare Danilo play in the midfield. I've put something on the foot mob. I'll pop it on the screen so that we can start having a look and playing around with it. Let me just get it set up. Here it comes. So to that end, I've got Sosa coming on the left, keeping Alanga on the right, and actually Anderson goes into the 10. So it's a role that we've spoken about for him, and I still think we need that creativity. I think Morgan comes out and has the rest, but Elliott moves up the pitch into the 10. So that's kind of where I think I would go. So out of the regular starters in the first team, you've got Sells, you've got Williams, you've got Alanga, Anderson, and a bit of Danilo, etc. Morato comes off the bench a lot. Sangare's been in and out. So there's a blend of changes there for me, Richard. Now you've got the foot mob on the screen. I mean, do you think that's a touch too many? Would you still stick with Eminem at the back, Milinkovic and Murillo, for example?
No, I kind of like this a lot. I think there's a lot of good balance between trying to give key players that are going to play, Premier League matches going forward and have been playing Premier League matches like Anderson, like Alanga. And Alanga really needs to get some confidence back, right? I mean, he's sort of gotten somewhat stagnant recently, and we've mentioned that before. He was such an important part of these runs where we get streaks going of victories, or at least not losing for good chunks of time. And so when he's at his best and he's really deadly, it creates a lot of challenges for opposing teams. And so giving him some confidence back by playing a team that's probably going to be somewhat deficient, we know Amari Hutchinson's not going to play, is a good thing to see him get that confidence back and get some momentum moving forward. But I love the idea of Anderson, because we always have to be having this in the back of our mind. Morgan Gibbs-White, as much as he loves the club and as much as he wants to play for Forest, certainly if we get in the Champions League, that's going to be solidified. I think it's going to be even more the case. But having Anderson play in that role, I think is critical, because it allows him to continue to have opportunities to show he can fill that void if needed. So, and I like giving Danilo and Sangare more minutes. We need to see them progress and get match fit and other things, and just get that acuity back in terms of football IQ and just awareness of things. But I don't want to risk Murillo and Milinkovic. They're too critical to what we do defensively. So I like the idea of keeping them off the pitch unless absolutely necessary. An injury pops up or something happens. But yeah, this is a great lineup. I mean, I would be very happy if this is where we went. And Sosa getting a chance to feature a little bit too, because we know, I think of him and Jota, I think he's got a little bit higher ceiling. So it's good to get him on the pitch to give him a chance to progress against a Premier League side, even if a lower end Premier League side.
And Ross, on that, the fact is that Ipswich are a Premier League side, but they're battling for survival. So they themselves will probably be thinking, look, we've got to make a decision here. Are we going to prioritise potentially staying in the Premier League, or do we want to go and try and win the Cup, which is possibly less likely? So my gut feeling is that they'll make changes as well. So I'd be interested on your comments on that aspect. But also, I wanted to get your opinion on Sosa, because he's shown moments, hasn't he, that he can score goals. I mean, he scored in both cup games so far. So do you think that Sosa has been possibly a little bit marginalised unfairly, or do you think that he's literally just back up and the cup's the only place he's going to get proper minutes?
I think it's more the latter for sure. I trust judgment here of Nuno on this one. He sees his folks. I do think they are just slightly off where that sort of starting core is. I think the variable here, if I just blend responses, is I do wonder whether we actually match Ipswich up a little bit more in the sort of 3-4-3, and actually Sosa would be sacrificed to accommodate the extra centre half. Maybe it would be Zach Abbott, as even if we were to go extreme. I think that's the only other variable here versus this matchup. I think the fullbacks or as wing backs are probably locked in, as is those two centre halves. It's just a question of formation. And to your point, ultimately Ipswich's priority has to be elsewhere. I know they have a big leap to try and stay up, but that is the crown jewels. And as much as I'm an FA Cup purist, finishing fourth is a bigger deal as well. So I think it's a priority for both teams is the Premier League. We have to be real about that. So hopefully it allows for an open game, and I think we can all be pretty neutral about where it takes us after that result.
Okay. So are you favouring then the back three? Because that's what we've done in the last two games, and Toffolo has played as that third kind of centre back as well. So again, it will evolve as per the opposition you play and as per the kind of round you're in, I guess. But are you still, Ross, leaning more towards that three at the back then?
Yeah, I think it'll be a good option with Toffolo, especially. Actually, I hadn't even thought about that. It'll be a good fit player that could, do a job and give us minutes. If we went for that 3-4-3, it would be kind of more reflective of what Ipswich did. Of the few games I managed to get to this season, it was actually the Ipswich game. And one of the things that was really stark to me was just how much space in midfield in the second half, especially Cajuste, had for Ipswich. And I wonder whether formation might play into Nuno's mind in terms of how to counterbalance some of that. So, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I know we're very flexible and agile, and sometimes we just shift that formation, once we're ahead. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we lined up more like you've just mocked up, that sort of 3-4-3.
Yeah, so if you're not seeing the screen, those listening, I've mocked it up to Toffolo going left, body centre, Morato on the right of the back three. I've taken Anderson out, just thinking about the midfield being Moreno and Williams as your wing backs per se, keeping Danilo and Sangare in the centre with a 1-year Langer and Sosa as your front three. What about you, Bruce? We've switched it around to a back three. You saw both formations, the 4-2-3-1 and this 3-4-3. Have you got something different in mind in terms of shape and personnel now, or are you favouring the back three perhaps?
No, I'm favoring the back four. I think it looks it matches up versus Ipswich a little bit better, in my opinion. Toff, I think, would be a good bench option. I do think Ipswich is going to be coming at us. We were talking before the show starts. I think they have a decent squad. Granted, most of it championship quality, but as we all know, a championship side. Sorry, I can't talk. Is they can take down a Premier League side. We've seen it. We've done it. I think we do need to go a little stronger. And starting a Toff, I love the guy. Don't get me wrong, but I just like to see a little bit stronger starting 11. The other side of that, on your lineup, I'm a little worried about Danilo and Sangare starting. Sangare, he just seems a little slow, and Danilo is not there yet either. The last few matches we've seen him, he definitely doesn't. He's not to 100% yet. So hence why I was saying I'd rather see a Morgan Gibbs-White and Anderson in the starting 11. When I look at that, I'm wondering, okay, who's going to get the goal here? Who's going to be the one pressing forward? Sosa, as you said, has scored, but Exeter. It's not really something to brag about. And Alenga, obviously starting 11, that's their best. And Awani coming up there. I'm just obviously he's been hit or miss on this form. So I'm really worried about when I look at that, who's going to get the goal, who's going to be pushing forward, assuming that Ipswich comes out with a fairly strong 11 as well. Are there, for their talent level. And then the other side of that is if Delap starts, Bali and Morato, I mean, I can see Delap getting the better of one of those two guys.
Okay. Anna in the comments says that Nuno values the cup. She says, I think he will put an almost full strength side out. Could well be that. Dan Escape is in the comments. He says, we are still in a fragile moment and need a win to get confidence back. I think I agree with that as well. It was the Exeter game, Richard, that Danilo and Sangare started, which I was surprised about, even against Exeter. And there was a lot of smiling faces at the work Sangare was doing. And that was true. He was doing well, but he was playing against an Exeter midfield, League One standard. He'd lost a lot of games on a pitch that wasn't fit for, putting the donkey out, really, because it was terrible. And so I still feel that Sangare has got a lot to prove. I've spoken on this podcast and other places previously about him, and I think I'm going to probably repeat. In the long term, I just don't think his Nottingham Forest career is going to be what we always wanted it to be. Again, I hope I'm wrong. I'm not hoping that he fails. I want him to succeed. I want them all to succeed. I'm fully behind him if he plays. He's got my full support. I'm not saying that that's not going to be the case. But my opinion is that he does look like he's towing a caravan a lot of the time, and he is just a little bit too slow. And so is this kind of game, Richard, for him, if he plays and if he starts, which I think he will, against Premier League opposition, is this a real chance for him? And how much is this a real chance for him to showcase what he's really all about?
Yeah, it's hard to gauge when you're talking about the opposition being Exeter, because in one sense, as you pointed out, you're gonna qualify if he plays well that he played against Exeter. And it's like, okay, well, what are you expecting to do against Exeter? I mean, if he looked poorly, I could clearly see why that would be problematic. I do agree. I think this is a good showcasing opportunity for him, because if he can manage the middle of the pitch the way that he's supposed to, add in a little bit of passing that he has shown some acumen with that in terms of how he weights the ball. There were some nice passes that he played over the top of the defense. Again, we're talking about Exeter, so it's not really something to be too excited about, but just in terms of that ability to have a range of passing from that level, that somewhat deeper space and place on the pitch and position on the pitch, I think would be great to see from him. And you're not wrong. I mean, it's like, we've talked about, and Bruce and I both are huge American football fans. Ross, I think, likes American football as well. You tend to see where players who have less athleticism or who don't have the makeup speed like an Ina has, they tend to have to overcome that and compensate for that by taking better angles and better positioning, because they know and they're paying attention. Their awareness has to get even more elite. And so the only way for him to do that against Premier League level, again, we're talking lower end. I understand that. But against they're still in the Premier League at this point. He has to begin to do that, because he does get turned quite a bit. And I know that's been your frustration with him. And it's been my frustration with him as well, because he's played against, I think he's been in the Champions League, if I'm not mistaken, with PSV, has he not? So if I believe so. So he's seen elite level talent, on the opposite side of the field. So I agree with you. At some point, these are the kinds of matches where he starts building a resume for whether he's going to stay and become a squad player and accept that, or in a depth piece, or if he's going to become something we need him to be, because we don't have a true six on this team. And it changes the trajectory of what our recruiting looks like in the offseason if we feel we need that going forward, or if we feel a Yates and an Anderson combined can give us that kind of coverage. So 100% agree that this is an opportunity for him to showcase, and he needs to step up. He's going to have his moments. I mean, everyone does. Anderson makes mistakes. He gets turned here and there. Yates may get turned here, and then we saw Dominguez get turned by Calafiore. I mean, that happens to players. It's just going to be keeping that as the exception, not the norm. And that's been the challenge. So I agree with you.
FA Cup games have kicked off already this round. So a couple of results in. Preston 3, Burnley 0. So Preston go through. Burnley, who have kept about 11 clean sheets in a row in all competitions, have gone out the cup. And it looks like, looking at their lineup, they played a little bit of a mixed kind of 11 from general normal starters and reserve players. Worrell started, and John J. Shelby started for them. And then Palace 3, Millwall 1. I didn't see this game, so I've been at my son's football match, but I've heard all about the absolutely horrific high kung fu challenge from the Millwall goalkeeper. And I'm yet to see it, but fingers crossed that Mateta is okay. Because I know he's gone to hospital, and it from all accounts, it looks quite bad. But we played Millwall in the close season in a nice pre-season friendly, and we know that, you know, they certainly don't mind when it comes to putting their foot in. So fingers crossed for Mateta. Okay, Ross, coming to you. I want to ask you about your opinion on Alex Moreno, because when he came in, I was, okay, Alex Moreno, really good. Nico, at that point, it's funny because at that point, Nico was playing right back. Aina was playing left back. And then Moreno come in so Aina could go to right back. And we had the out-and-out left back in Moreno. And he had some good games for us. And certainly against Liverpool away, it was very good. But he was a victim, I think, of not being able to play against Villa, because obviously being tied to them as a loan player. And it just, again, showed me that Nico Williams, when it really gets down to it, he responds. He did it last season as well. So he's responded and put in some absolutely fantastic displays. And all credit for Nuno as well for actually playing him at left back. So rather than bring him in and switch Aina back over, he put Nico in at left back while he's played there for Wales. He's been brilliant, I think. But it's meant that Alex Moreno's minutes have been really limited. So what are your thoughts on him in terms of, are we going to sign him in the summer, do you think? Or do you think it'll just be a case of, look, it's a loan that we got what we wanted out of it. He's likely to go back to Betis and we move on. And, you know, is he your choice to come in? I mean, we talked about Toffolo. Is Toffolo maybe ahead of him as a left back for this game? You're on mute, Billy, I think. Ross, you're on mute. No, we just lost your audio, Ross, for the moment. I'll let you try and sort that out. I'll ask you that, Bruce, if you can take yourself off mute. So what are your thoughts, Alex Moreno? I'm going to come to you. So, we can move it across. What are your thoughts, Alex Moreno?
So I like Alex Moreno. I think he's a solid, what I view as a backup to Williams and Aina. Would I sign him again for next season? Probably not. I'd rather invest in some younger talent. Is somebody that we can build up and build around. The only way I really want to keep him, if hopefully not, but if Aina doesn't come back next season, then I'd really want to keep Moreno. But yeah, I'm leaning towards the not re-signing him, but I do like him. I just think he's in the point of his career where he can probably go to another club and be a regular starter. We're here. I don't see that happening.
Andrew Prothero in the comments says we need to let Ipswich win, and he says he's a Forest fan, but he doesn't want to be in the Premier League and FA Cup.
Not letting anybody win.
That's an interesting take. Me personally, I think we can do both. I think we're good enough to win the FA Cup and stay in the top four. Ross, let's do a sound check. Are you back with us?
Yeah, I think I shook out the gremlins.
There we go. You're back with us. So I'll switch back to you again. I was asking you about your thoughts on Moreno and Toffolo.
Yeah. So I think the key point for me is that Moreno has elevated Williams and Aina. And, if that's the unintended consequence of his signing, then great. I think he'll feature Monday. But I share Bruce's sentiment in terms of I'm pretty neutral if we were to sign him or not. I actually probably lean more towards rolling the dice on someone younger because I think I trust our recruitment. So I don't see him having like a major role for us really this season because of the way that he's been second choice to Williams, and that is more a compliment to Williams and how good he has been.
Okay. We are just at the halfway point. Going to take a quick break.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Perfect cheesy mix. If you haven't yet placed an order with the Cheese Trader, what are you waiting for? You can get 10% discount when you quote Talking Reds, and that's not just a one-time discount. You can get a discount every single time. Stu is a Forest fan. He's a great guy. It's a family business. And so for all your cheesy goods, please support the Cheese Trader in York. Okay, Richard, just thinking again about the formation, because we talked about changes, we talked about people needing minutes and so on. Callum Hudson-Odoi is a player that did sit out a couple of games. He came on against Fulham, looked great, played against Newcastle, you know, apart from obviously the first half when things were going a little bit tits up, you know, he still looked one of our better players. And then definitely against Arsenal, I thought, you know, he played well. So maybe Sosa doesn't get a start. Maybe Hudson-Odoi plays, or maybe, in fact, Hudson-Odoi plays on the right like he was, and Sosa gets his start on the left. How important has Hudson-Odoi become to the defining part of our season, as in the last 10 games or so?
Yeah, we know he's a goal-scoring threat, especially when he's coming off the left side and cutting into the right, as we talked about in the last match. He can clearly play the right side very effectively as well. I think he becomes a little less of a goal-scoring threat, at least in terms of his normal mode. But he's incredibly effective, as we've talked about time and time again on the ball. It's just having those kinds of players with that blend of skills with the ball at his feet, ability to pick out a pass, coupled with a good pace to try to stress anyone from a fullback perspective, and just high football intelligence and knowing where things are, great awareness, is all those things just blended. I mean, you can't underscore what that means for us, because we do have some young players on our team that are growing and developing. And so having a guy who's gone through some adversity, come back in and shown his quality again, maybe not in the same way he did it for Chelsea, because maybe, you know, he seemed prior to injury had more elite pace than he does now, but his pace is enough to create problems. So having that kind of leadership and that kind of performance level that's pretty consistent week in and week out, even at the beginning of the season, what we were seeing is he was getting doubled or tripled and we found ways, I think, to somewhat alleviate that for him. And so as a team, and so it's just so critical to what we do. And we've seen it when he's not there, even though Sosa's played admirably, even though Elanga's played admirably and filled in at times for him. It just doesn't have the same level of quality, I think, and consistency that we need going forward, especially knowing that, yes, we've got a Man City on the horizon, but we've got other teams that we know are in that top 10 range, and certainly at the bottom, closer to the bottom of the table, that we have to play still. And so having guys like that available to us who can provide value in all aspects of offensive play creates a major benefit for us. And we saw even in the last match, he actually stepped up his defensive play as well. He dropped back and played admirably in that sense too. So there's just a lot of versatility there in terms of his individual game. And he can be, I mean, we talked about it. He could probably play the 10 if that was necessary. It's just a matter of keeping him where he is and taking advantage of what he does to try to draw people away from other players and give other players space. And, you know, all of those things combined. It's just a brilliant footballer, and we were so blessed to have him, especially at the price point that we got him. Right, I'm sure he's worth a lot more than he was before he came to us. Now,
a good comment from Anna. She says, "I want to see Big T up front with Elanga and Hudson-Odoi on the wings. We've mostly seen him play with bench wingers. Would love to see what he can do with top level service." I mean, that's a good point, isn't it, Bruce? I mean, what are your thoughts on Taiwo, firstly? And do you think Anna's got a point that actually, you know what, let's see Taiwo get a start with our elite level wingers?
Yeah, no, I actually couldn't say it better than Anna did there. I think that's a great point. I love Big T, man. He's done really well for us over the past few seasons. Obviously, he not so much this year, but getting those two wingers on the left and right of him, seeing what he can do with that kind of talent, not having to play with Silva and Sosa, who obviously are a step below, would be something to see. I mean, if he can't perform with those two guys, then I think maybe it's time to move on. But I still think he can do a job. I still think he can get in there and score. So yeah, let's do it. I think if Nuno, if he does value the cup and he wants to move forward, he wants to win the cup, which I think he does. I would expect to see that, and hopefully we can put to bed early so we can give those guys some rest as well, because obviously we have City coming up. But no, I think that's something I would prefer to see. When I was mentioning it earlier, I think I said Callum Hudson-Odoi is the big question to me if we're going to start him or not. I do think Alanga gets the start. I would prefer to see Callum Hudson-Odoi in the starting 11.
Sure. Ross, just kind of switching tact back into the goalkeepers department. Carlos Miguel, it's difficult when you're a goalkeeper and you're not playing, because you sit there and you're waiting for your chance. And we've seen with Matt Sells, when he came into Forest in that January window, that sure, we'd had a real challenge in the goalkeeping department, but he seemed to fix the problem in that he brought stability, he brought security, he brought confidence without being an absolute world beater. There were still a couple of goals that went in that we, looking back, the XG was that he possibly should have saved it. We know about him this season. We know about how he's just gone on to another level. He's going to probably be in the Premier League team of the season as the goalkeeper. And there's Carlos Miguel coming in for Brazil, really highly regarded. He's had limited opportunities. The game against Newcastle in the League Cup, I thought he had a very good game. And I still stand by it that I do not blame him for that opening goal in the first 10 seconds. There wasn't an awful lot he could do. He had a good game against Luton, made a very good save. I think it was in the second half against them. But of course, it was the drop ball against Exeter that seemed to make everyone all of a sudden sit up and say, oh my God, we've got a bit of a dudding goal here. And I kind of felt that was not everyone, but people getting a little bit carried away. It's one mistake. It happens when you're rusty, the ball comes in. It's almost like he was trying to think about the next action before he even caught it. And he fumbled it and it went in. I thought he made a good save ahead of their second goal. It wasn't his fault. The ball went in off volley. But he's been out with it with the hamstring injury, so he's not going to be involved, it would seem, this weekend. The reason why I'm kind of bringing him up is that, do you think that he is going to be good enough for us as a second choice goalkeeper to challenge to be a first choice goalkeeper, or was that possibly the beginning of the end of his Forest career?
I think it's more the latter. I think he was a bit of a hedge purchase, pre-low cost, low risk. Let's give him a run. I think there was elements of the game against Exeter that the confidence was concerning. For someone who's 6 foot lots, his dominance in the air and sort of presence was not really that well felt. And I think the club is looking for an alternative, and probably with the assumption that as Sells ages out, he probably defaults to being the number 2, and you'd have a super robust number 2. So we'd probably bring in a younger keeper. We've obviously been linked with Kelleher. So my assumption is that Miguel won't be long for Forest. I think kind of crossing the threads with the Sangari thing, we're not pot committed on Miguel, whereby we are pot committed, to use a poker analogy with Sangari. Like, we all want that to work because we've outlaid so much. Miguel, it's less so. I think they'll roll the dice.
Okay. Richard, you put together a few stats for us. Danscape and Raf are having a break today. I think Dan said he was in the garden. So he's doing a little bit of gardening, but I think he's still along in the comments. So Richard has stepped in with a few kind of stats on the team and the opposition. What have you got for us, Richard?
Yeah, just getting a gauge on, we saw, we probably don't completely remember all the details about the match where we played them earlier this season at home, but they tend to operate in a 4-2-3-1 similar to what we do. So just giving you an idea, giving you a viewpoint here of kind of what their formations have looked like. So against us the first time around, they did kind of mirror our formation. They had Amari Hutchinson out on the right, but he tends to kind of vacillate in between the 10 and the right. So Connor Chaplin, I don't think would be playing at this point. I don't think he's been playing much, given that Philogene Badace has been in form for them, and he's been playing more on the right-hand side in a right wing position. And then they've moved Amari Hutchinson in the middle. Well, clearly Amari Hutchinson isn't playing in this match. It'll be interesting to see how they manage that against Tottenham, they were in that 4-2-3-1 again, but against Manchester United, which we know tends to be a more high possession team, they moved to a back three with Greaves on the left and Darren O'Shea in the middle and Tuanzebe on the right back position. Then they actually put Jaden Philogene-Bidace in a kind of a right wing back role, which is interesting, which I think is something that Dan had talked about that Nuno would do sometimes with Traore back in the day with the Wolves. So it's kind of a similar approach in that manner. So in the next section, just to give you an idea in terms of where their goals are coming from, we've got far more goals than they do, and they conceded more goals, significantly more goals than we have. We've got 44 goals on the season compared to their 26. And then we've got, I think they've given up 54 goals, almost double what we have. So from an attacking perspective, they don't take a lot of shots from outside the box per se. They try to get within the box. They try to play within the box and try to stress you from that perspective, which most teams are going to do, right? They're going to play the percentages and try to score from closer range. But they're also not scoring a lot of header goals, which I think is good for us because we know if we've got a volley in there. Now, granted, Morato's been a bit inept when it comes to the I can't seem to get that off there, Greg. I don't know why that slide thing showing for anybody else because it's yeah. Okay. Anyway. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry too much about them. Yeah, it's all right. I wouldn't worry too much about them from a set piece standpoint or from, how they're gonna approach it in terms of being concerned about them, pummeling us with crosses like we kind of saw with Fulham and trying to create problems for us from that perspective. From a possession standpoint, we're pretty much on par. We're both low possession teams. The difference is we're better on the counter and we're better at open play and scoring from those kinds of approaches, whereas they don't, clearly. And so from an accuracy, a passing standpoint, they tend to be pretty accurate. They're a few percentage points higher than us in overall accuracy. Not much to really see there in terms of how we're going to manage that. But from a crossing standpoint, pretty much identical, ironically, from an accuracy standpoint, 23.8% is what we've got on the screen right now. In terms of where they attack from, they're actually attacking they have a good balance in terms of left and right. We know Leif Davis tends to be a little bit more sort of offensively oriented in terms of the way that he approaches his game. He's going to attack more from the left, and he's going to play up, kind of similar to Anthony Robinson. I think Anthony Robinson's a far superior player, and he's a better defender, and he's a little bit quicker, stronger, bigger, player. But Leif Davis operates kind of similar, and he's gonna bomb up the left-hand side of the pitch. They're going to have usually going through Amari Hutchinson on the right, and now it's Philogene-Bidace on the right. So we just got to be aware of the fact that the attack isn't oriented around one particular place. How they change that, I don't know what Kieran McKenna is going to do there, but they're probably going to stay somewhat within that same balance. So it's just giving an idea. Whereas with us, we clearly understand from Forest's perspective, we are attacking from that left-hand side. That's where we tend to focus our attack. You saw that last season, with Ina and Callum Hudson-Odoi hooking up on there and linking up there. Now it's kind of more Williams and Callum Hudson-Odoi, and so we've just continued to kind of approach it that way. Anderson drifting over left, you see Morgan drifting over to the left, but for them, it's going to come either direction. We don't have a solid understanding in terms of exactly where they're going to focus their attack on us. In terms of defensive capability, I think it's pretty obvious. The top piece right here, where it's clean sheets, I mean, it's so disparate, and we know that combined from our defensive capability, but also what Sells has done, as you just touched on, Greg, in terms of the number of how well he's performed just overall, but also in conjunction with how the defense is played. And so we've got 11 clean sheets. They have 2. Clearly, that is a major contributing factor to why they're right there in the relegation zone, at the top of that relegation zone. So we're a little bit better in the tackle, a little bit better in terms of interceptions, not by much. Clearances, we have a few better metrics than they do. 29.3 clearances per game to their 25.4. Saves per game, pretty on par. Balls recovered, about the same, for around 47 per game. Errors leading to shots, I think, is an important metric in this sense because they've got 19 to our 11. And even more importantly, errors leading to goals, they have 10 to our 2 on average per game. So that's a huge difference, a huge disparate number. And that clearly contributes to why they're such a poor side and why they haven't been able to win a lot of matches and when they haven't been able to progress up the table. So on paper, as we kind of imagined, we are way ahead of them, I think, in terms of quality of players, as well as some of the key metrics that we see in those slides.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, we're going to wrap things up with score predictions. I'll come to you first, Bruce. Monday night, under the lights, City Ground, round 5, Nottingham Forest Ipswich. What are you saying?
I think we're going to win 2-1. I think they pick a goal off us, but we have enough quality to put them away.
Okay. Ross, what are you saying, Ross?
We're going to get it done, and we're going to get it done good. 3-0.
Like your style. And Richard Spray.
Yeah, I tended to go with the 3-0, but I'm gonna add one more. I'll go 4-0 just to make it a little bit different from Ross. But yeah, I feel like we're gonna smash them. I think we just need that, like Dan said, that infusion of confidence, that ability to go into the next match against Man City with some,
Excellent.
With all that.
I'm going to go 2-0. Don't know who's going to score because I'm not quite sure who's going to play, but I think Tywell will score if he plays. So yeah, 2-0 for me. That wraps up our FA Cup preview. One thing I will say is that Rory Delap, he looks to me like the heir apparent to Chris Wood. So when Ipswich get relegated, because I think they probably will, then for me, Rory Delap is the player we go after because his style. Liam Delap. Sorry,
Rory is dad.
Rory's his dad. Liam Delap. Yeah. That's how old I am. That's all those long throws.
Probably Liam get Rory for
you know what I mean. Liam Delap, Rory Delap, any lap will do. Yeah, we go after him because he is cut from the same piece of cloth as Chris Wood. He's a bit of a younger version, I think. He's a really good player. So he's the player to go after. We are out of time. I want to say thank you very much to everyone who's joined in the comments and came late. I saw Gary was with us and Andy Cale's with us and Big Arn is with us as well. He's saying 2-0. Excellent. Nice one, Big Arn. Danscape says 1-0. Anna says 2-0. Lovely jubbly. Brucey over in Texas, thank you very much.
Hey, guys. Always a pleasure to be on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Ross, thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go win this thing.
Let's do this. Let's win this thing. I love that. Richard Spray, you got to get in the car and get the people out to work.
Yeah, I got to go into full dad mode now. Yeah. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure, guys. Appreciate you guys. And yeah, I agree. You Reds.
Indeed. We have got lots to look forward to, guys. It doesn't have to be the league or the FA Cup. This team can do both. Trust me. This team can do both. We are the team of miracles. We are a team that makes special things happen. We're going to go to the FA Cup final and we're going to finish top 4. You heard it here first.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Rangers.